I'm Michael Bain, and welcome to Triggered, brought to you by Midway USA, just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors, and as always, coming to you from Dragon House Studios here at the secret hidden bunker in the Rocky Mountains. And it's probably fair to say the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. You can tell that just looking at this table. What I want to talk about in today's show are these two AKs. And you've seen them both before. You've kind of never seen them together. I kind of got the band back together here. You've never seen them together. And what I want to talk to you about is differing philosophies by the builder that leads to different ways of implementing those philosophies on the guns. I'm going to make a really bold statement here now and say that these are probably two of the best AKs available in the United States right now. I would say these easily are two of the best AKs available in the world right now. The first one, this here, was built by Jim Fuller, Fuller Phoenix in Phoenix, Arizona. Of course, Scottsdale, I think, that's fair. But Jim is one of the foremost AK builders, most knowledgeable AK people in the entire world. Of course, the founder of Rifle Dynamics, which was one of the first companies to really say, hey, what can we make an AK platform do? How far can we push those limits? And Jim is also one of the three nicest people in the world and a very, very good friend. The rifle here is from another very good friend of mine, Dave Lauk at D&L Sports, Prescott, Arizona, near Gunsight. Dave has been a gunsmith for 40, 50 years. And in the course of his gunsmithing, he's done beautiful, beautiful 1911s, presentations to presidents. He's built some very exotic long-range rifles. Dave is one of the great master gunsmiths in the United States. But around 40 years ago, he started working with carbines and in many ways became, I won't say obsessed with carbines, but fascinated with them. So what he wanted to do a few years ago was take in not only his own experience, which is law enforcement and some of the matches he ran in Wyoming, a lot of military special forces input, but from some of the best riflemen in the country to create what he thought was an ideal carbine based off the AK platform. That's this. This is the SLR. Both of these guns are 7.62 by 39. Both of them are irrationally good for an AK. We all know what we think about when we say AK, right? We think about something that you can shake and rattle and roll it, but that always works. However, that's not the way master gunsmiths like Jim Fuller or Dave Lauk think about these guns. They think about the application of the carbine and the application that goes beyond equipping a lot of indigenous peoples, telling them to close their eyes, pull the trigger, and run forward. They're interested in making these carbines as useful as they can to the user. And they approach it very, very differently. I think first we need to hammer out just a couple of things really quickly. Number one, what is a carbine? Well, short rifle, right? In this case, both of the master builders are talking about a 200-yard gun, 200-yard gun. One of the problems we have in America, and it's a really big problem actually, is we take a hoe and we want to turn it into a hammer. We take a wrench and we wonder if we can use it to dig a ditch. Actually, no, you can't. Or you can use it, but it doesn't work that well. In the case of guns, we take a gun that is an excellent 200-yard gun and say, damn, it doesn't really shoot all that well at 500. Well, actually it doesn't. And if you take a 13-pound precision rifle and try to run and gun with it, you'll find it doesn't do that. These are specialty application guns. So 200 yards is the magic number. 200 yards is excellent for a 7.62 by 39 cartridge. 7.62 by 39 cartridge is an amazingly good cartridge. It has always been an amazingly good cartridge. So let's think about these two guns and what's in the minds of the makers when they put them together. Take a look first here at this gun that I built with Jim Fuller. When I say I built it, I mostly sat there when Jim said, no, that's not the way you do this. But key point here is we were looking for a utilitarian carbine. And the way Jim approaches that is with his encyclopedic knowledge of AKs, he simply took the best parts he could find. He's tried every single combination of the billions of AK parts. Really, remember, I don't even know how many varieties of AK there are, but the answer is a whole lot. And Jim is able to sort through those parts and say, I'm going to take the best of this. We're going to build a straight-out utility AK. And that's what you see reflected here. All regular AK parts, a couple of little changes just to get this Picatinny rail in. But we'll talk about some of those changes when we come back.
Years of laziness led to this very moment. Looks like Stan's gonna need some help. Let's get some organization in here. Some lighting, some security, some monitoring.
That does look nice.
Imagine that! There's more room in an organized vault. Keep your valuables organized, safe, and secure with Lockdown. Secure your lifestyle.
Welcome back to Triggered, where today we're talking about two of the very best AKs in the whole wide world. This one from Dave Lau, D&L Sports. This one from Jim Fuller, Fuller Phoenix. And when we look at the Fuller gun, I think what you see here is an idealized vision of Mikhail Kalashnikov's design, because that's Jim Fuller being able to take what the best parts are and assemble them with actually meticulous craftsmanship. How meticulous is the craftsmanship? I put in these rivets, some of these rivets, and I put one in, it was just the tiniest bit off. Quite literally, you could not see that that rivet wasn't seated exactly right. And Jim says, I hope you don't mind, but after you leave, before I can transfer the gun to you, I'm going to change the rivet. I said, you can't tell. And he goes, but I know. That's meticulous craftsmanship. So obviously, folding metal stock, standard iron sights here, AK iron sights, AK gas system, standard, bolt handle, everything, magazine release down here. The only really change, which I think is one that certainly Mikhail Kalashnikov would approve of, is the addition of this forward section of Picatinny rail that bolts around the gas tube and fits very well. It's a really simple solution to adding a pick rail to an AK. You're probably going to ask me right now, you say, well, gosh, man, why do you got that high-dollar optics, high-dollar glass on these guns? Well, a couple of reasons. The biggest reason is heat. AKs run hot. This gas tube area here, where you got the gas tube and the piston is moving, it gets really hot. If you take your $125 red dot and put it there at this exact point or any point here on the Fuller AK, you're likely to cook it off. And similar here with the D&L gun, same thing. This is an aim point. Why? Because it's a darn sturdy sight. It can take the heat. It can take the pounding. So Jim, working with, again, I believe this is Polish wood on it. It's a very simple gun. It's a very light gun. This gun comes in right at 7 pounds the way it sits there. I just hung it on the scale before I brought it out here. And we sighted it in at 25, verified it at 50. It ran like a top, which is what I would expect from any gun built by a master gunsmith. From the ground up, ran like a top. And then I was able to spend a day in the Travis Haley's group AK class, which was fascinating. Now, this is what I mean in terms of different philosophy. One of the things Jim Fuller says to me is that you can't really make an AK into an AR. AR is a different gun. And so if you're going to run an AK, you need to run it as if it was an AK. Obviously, you got your right hand charging handle. That's going to lead you to reach over the top to rack it, reach underneath to rack it. You understand its limitations at 200 yards. But the thing is, it's surprising. In sitting in the class and running this gun in a class, running the Fuller AK in a class, it was surprising how nimble it felt. Does that make sense? It can be manipulated very quickly. As quickly as, say, an AR pistol. So a short-barreled AR. The gun handles amazingly well. The gun shoots amazingly well. Regardless of if you go to positional shooting, which we did some prone shooting with it, but I was shooting with iron sights, and I suck on iron sights. If I had had this Trijicon dot on it, a green MRO, miniature rifle optic on it, it would have been pure rock and roll. I loved handling this gun. I loved running this gun. But as I said, Jim Fuller designed it to be run as an AK with an AK manual of arms. Now, a lot of times you will see an AK that has every single AR-15 accessory on it, where you build the AK into something like an AR. That's not the path that Jim Fuller likes. Jim Fuller says an AK is an AK. I love both of them. They're fun to shoot, both guns are. So let me jump over here to Dave Lauch's gun, to Dave Lauch's interpretation of the gun. What Dave wanted was a do-everything carbine. And he wanted it so that, let's say you're a Special Forces soldier, and I don't know if this ever happened, maybe I'm just making this stuff up, but let's say you're in Special Forces and you need an AK because you're in a country where you look a little out of place running around with maybe an AR. But you need an AK that can deliver at a designated marksman level. Now, that's not a sniper gun, but it is a gun that would be useful in a marksmanship situation out to 200 yards. So that was in Dave's head when he started putting these guns together. And the way Dave approached it, once again, master gunsmith, meticulous craftsman, was essentially Dave rethought every single part of this gun. Every single part of this gun has had Dave's hands on it. It's been modified. We're going to take a look at some of those details when we return. This week's Triggered is brought to you by Midway USA. Just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors. Taurus USA. Designed to protect. Rock Island Arms Corps. Solid as a rock. Volquartsen. Engineering the world's finest rimfire rifles, pistols, and parts. And Franklin Armory. Making some of the most innovative guns in America. Okay, kids, what's the very first thing you notice about the D&L SLR? Well, the bolt handle's on the left side instead of the right side. You can have it on the left side, the right side, or ambidextrous. This is a one-off rifle. It's fair to say that the Jim Fuller AK is a custom gun. But this is a one-off custom gun. That means that it is built to order, and the person who is ordering the gun specs it. I spec the left-hand bolt handle. What's the other thing you notice right away? Well, on the regular AK, the setup is that the fixed sight sets on this forward trunnion. And what Lauch has done is build a special sight mount on this forward trunnion. That's where his Picatinny rail sits. It's part of the trunnion. And then he built custom sights, front and rear sights. They can be folded down and locked down. Now, both of those sights have tritium in them. They are night sights, and they are true co-witness with the aim point. That is the sight picture, the rear sight and the front sight posts sitting in there are in the middle of the aim point. The MRO does not co-witness on the Fuller AK. I'm working with getting an aim point mount low enough to get a bottom third co-witness. That is the co-witness sights are in the bottom third of the aim point. Not that big a deal. So you see there, what else do you notice here about this? Well, it's got an AR type stock on it. However, it's not necessarily an AR buffer tube. It's a special mount that Dave has worked into this gun. He wanted a very specific stock on this gun. So he built the mount for it. You also see a magazine well, because for his clients, they wanted to be able to change the magazine very quickly. Now, you know the AK magazine, it rocks in, locks in. You know, you rock it in, it locks in place. Very quick with this magazine well. You see the magazine release also includes an extension into the trigger guard and makes it really easy to drop the magazine. The barrel on the Lout gun is free-floated. Now, typically, if you want the most accuracy you can wring out of a gun, you need to free float the barrel. That is, the barrel isn't touching anything. It free floats inside this custom D&L Sports handguard, which is a pretty beefy thing here. But why is it beefy there too? Well, it's got to be really to allow the barrel to free float. And secondly, it's got to be beefy because you can attach a bipod, which attaching a bipod, you can kind of sort of do it on a regular AK. There's a dance you can do to get that to work. But here, that was a spec on this gun, the ability to attach a bipod. Custom gas system, Dave adjusts the gas just right, locks it in place before he sends the rifle out. Another thing I was going to mention, of course, you got a flash hider here, flash hider slash compensator slash wire cutter on the end of the Lout gun, whereas you have the basic slant flash hider on the AK, which actually works pretty well. It's kind of a neat little thing. Triggers. You know, 99% of every AK I've ever shot, the triggers just basically sucked. They just weren't very good. But that was within the original design parameters of the gun. You're looking at soldiers who are not trained to a super high level. You know, they don't need a 3-pound trigger, 4-pound trigger. They don't need crispness. They just need something that goes bang and continues to go bang. So Jim and Dave approached the trigger in a little different manner here. This is, I believe, an ALG trigger. Of course, ALG part of Geisley triggers. And the trigger pull on this gun is somewhere between incredibly super and magnificent. It is a flawless trigger pull. And you're going like, well, there you are. Here's the trick. Using AR parts, I think some Tapco parts, Jim Fuller got an incredibly good trigger pull on this AK. And again, you're using the standard parts on it. In both cases, the trigger pull makes these guns sweethearts to run. And I mean, I think that's super. The handguard here, I believe mag pull, or I'm sorry, the pistol grip mag pull on the Fuller gun, I think it's a Tapco, one of the original Tapco pistol grips for the AK, and it just works super. It just works super. So what you have is, you take your pick. I'm not going to lie to you, these guns aren't cheap. You know, when people say, well, boy, the great thing about an AK is it's dirt cheap. Dirt cheap ain't here. A one-off custom is going to cost you a lot, always. When I say a lot, I'm saying $3,000 to $5,000 for a one-off custom. That is a gun built specifically to your specs. I'm going to say a Fuller gun is going to cost you within $2,500, $2,200, $2,700, and you go, oh wow, these are precision machines, and they are built by two of the top craftsmen in the entire world on AKs. And if you guys want to see them, and I tell you what, I will actually let you shoot them if you're there. I have once again signed up for Red October. Every year, Red October's AK World Championships, put on by my good friend Brian Nelson in Las Vegas. Brian and I shot together in Cowboy. We shot together in AK. And Brian says I'm the perfect guy for him in terms of a competitor because I give him the money and I don't show up. But this year I'm going to show up. I will have both these guns with me. You can say, hey, Michael, we love Triggered. We saw those guns. Can I shoot them? And my answer will be yes. I'm sure Jim Fuller will be there as well. And You need to meet him, and hey, I'll introduce you. Okay, that's what I wanted to talk you through on these guns. I want to also mention that in our special projects section on michaelbain.tv, we've got something there really, really special. It is an interview with Tom Givens and Ed Monk on active shooters. Now, we've mentioned Ed and Tom before. Of course, this was the interviews were at TACCon down in Dallas a few weeks ago. But I think you need to see this special because you will come away from it knowing more about active shooters than you can find anywhere else. Quite literally, this is the second best thing to having a class with Tom or a class with Ed. But so you want to check this out because it's information you need to know to keep yourself and your family safe. I'm Michael Bain. This is Triggered. Find us on michaelbain.tv along with all our specials, along with the podcast. Also, find us on YouTube. Go there and subscribe because, hey, why not until they toss us all off. We are brought to you, of course, by Midway USA, just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors. And boy, they have a ton of AK parts. We'll see you next week.